As a Marxist feminist scholar concerned with the global reconfiguration of gender relations under the conditions of violence and conflict, this war, I think, must be situated within a broader relations of imperialism, capitalism, and militarized and racist patriarchy. What we are witnessing is not an isolated confrontation, but a moment within an evolving imperialist formation, one that is actively reshaping the contours of the world order. Therefore, this war, framed as a military aggression involving the United States and an Israel against Iran, carries a distinct ideological charge. And unlike purely secular geopolitical conflicts, it is marked by competing invocations of the divine, mobilized through Islam, Judaism, and evangelical Christianity. These religious articulations are not incidental. They are instrumentalized to legitimize violence, consolidate political authority, and naturalize war as destiny. This fusion of militarism and theology intensifies the conflict's character, embedding it within a deeply patriarchal, racist, colonial, and fascist logic. At its core, however, the war is driven by material forces. Global capitalism appears to have reached a point of structural impasse, what might be understood as a crisis of accumulation on a world scale. The expansion of profitability is no longer assured through conventional means. And as a result, militarizations become a mechanisms for reordering markets, securing resources, and displacing crisis. So to sort of summarize what I've said so far, I would say that a Marxist feminist analysis insists that we also attend to how these dynamics are lived and reproduced through gender relations. Wars of this kind intensify existing inequalities, reinscribe patriarchal control, and reorganize labor, both paid and unpaid, often placing disproportionate burdens on women and marginalized communities. It is therefore urgent to develop a critical understanding of capitalist fascistic imperialism, its mechanisms for generating conflict, sustaining it, and circulating it through the world. And I think that at this moment, such an analysis is indispensable if we are to challenge and dismantle the discourses and normalize mass violence, social destruction, and the erasure of the entire population, as we are seeing that it is happening not only in Iran, continuous genocide in Gaza and in Lebanon. Beirut is now in the reports are saying that it is not flattened, but 99,000 housing units are damaged. 1.2 million are displaced. And let's not forget about what is going on in Sudan. So 12 million people displaced, 25 million people facing famine conditions. These extensions are not merely spillovers, but integral to the same global system, revealing how localized conflicts are interconnected with a broader imperial and capitalist restructuring. So to understand one is to begin to see the architecture, the whole global structure of them all. They claim that foreign intervention, particularly by the United States, can serve as a vehicle for liberation is historically and analytically untenable. Its absurdity can be understood on at least two interconnected levels. First, at the global level, there is no credible historical example since the end of World War II in which US military intervention has resulted in genuine popular liberation. On the contrary, such interventions have consistently functioned to secure geopolitical dominance and protect capitalist interests, often by suppressing progressive, socialist, communist, or anti-colonial movements. During the Cold War, US involvement frequently supported dictatorial regimes against leftist forces, as seen in 1973 Chilean coup d'etat in Guatemala, or backing authoritarian states in countries such as Indonesia following mass anti-communist massacre. Similarly, across Latin America, Africa, and Asia, interventions during anti-colonial struggles rarely aligned with the emancipatory aspirations of local population. And then in more contemporary times, Iraq in 2003, or the prolonged war in Afghanistan have produced devastation, violence, and long-term instability rather than liberation. Second, in the specific case of Iran, the notion that foreign intervention could deliver freedom is deeply contradicted by historical experience. Iranian political consciousness has been shaped precisely through repeated encounters with external interferences. These include the forced abdication of Reza Shah Pahlavi during the Anglo-Soviet invasion of Iran, and most decisively the 1953 Iranian coup d'etat, in which you know that the democratically elected government of Mohammad Mossadegh was overthrown by the US and the British backing. This intervention reinstalled monarchical rule and entrenched decades of dictatorial rule under Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. The Iranian Revolution of 1979 itself must be understood in part as a mass rejection of the history of foreign domination and imposed capitalist imperialist dependency. So, for many Iranians, therefore, foreign intervention is not synonymous with liberation, but it is with subjugation, dependency, and the distortion of domestic political trajectories over the social transformation within the country. It risks, I think, the foreign intervention reproducing the very condition it claims to resolve, undermining internal struggles for self-determination by subordinating them to external geopolitical agenda. So there is no liberation through external intervention. In this sense, I think that the language of liberation through intervention operates less as a genuine emancipatory project and more as an ideological justification for imperialist power. Any meaningful transformation in Iran, as elsewhere, must emerge from within the social and political struggles of its own people, not through externally imposed forces. I think that this question is important, but we also we can sort of add many other questions to it. For example, where is the left? Where is solidarity? Where is our anti-imperialist, feminist, anti-fascist front? How do we build it collectively, urgently, and without abstraction? And by without abstraction, I emphasize on that. I mean by anchoring analysis in historical specificity, material relations, and ongoing struggles. So examples, to give you some examples, I would say that my political consciousness was shaped early on by two slogans I encountered through the Confederation of Iranian Students back in the 70s in the US. One was down with the US imperialism, and the other one's down with the Shah. These were not narrow or purely national demands. They were embedded in a broader internationalist horizon that connected struggles across geographies, from Darfur to Palestine, from Vietnam to the anti-apartheid movement in South Africa. So anti-imperialism in this sense was not simply opposition to a particular state, but part of a global political imagination rooted in solidarity with liberation movements and a critique of capitalism, colonialism, and racial domination. So historically, anti-imperialism within Iran left movements emerge in response to concrete experiences of foreign intervention and economic dependency that I mentioned above. However, after the Iranian Revolution, anti-imperialist discourse within segments of the left underwent a significant transformation. What had once been a materially grounded and internationally oriented politics increasingly became rhetorical, and in some cases, politically subordinated to the ideological framing of the newly established Islamic Republic. A key analytical failure, I think, was the inability or refusal of parts of the left to critically assess the class character of the emerging state, rather than recognizing it as a theocratic formation embedded within capitalist imperialist relations. Some currents misidentified as an anti-imperialist force simply because of its opposition to the United States. So let me bring my lens back here, that as a Marxist feminist perspective, I insist on recovering the earlier depth of anti-imperialist analysis, one that situates Iran within global circuits of capital while also attending to the ways in which theocratical domination is reproduced internally. This means refusing binary frameworks and instead understanding anti-imperialism as a struggle that must simultaneously confront external intervention, domestic authoritarianism and dictatorship, and the gender and class relations that sustains both of them. I would point to two interrelated myths that urgently need to be confronted. First, my analysis rejects the mythology of an quote unquote axis of anti imperialism. The idea that opposition to US power constitutes a progressive or emancipatory politics, I think that it is deeply flawed. The substitution of one dictatorial bloc for another does not produce liberation. It merely recognizes domination under a different configuration. This logic has enabled forms of political complicity in which authoritarian, patriarchal, and carceral states are legitimized so long as they position themselves rhetorically against US imperialism. Within this framework, the elevation of the Islamic Republic of Iran to the status of an inherently anti-imperialist force functions as a powerful ideological cover. It obscures the extent to which the state remains embedded in global circuits of capitalist accumulation enforces restrictive border regimes, relies on more militarized forms of extraction, and systematically suppress dissent. To frame such formation as emancipatory is not only analytically inaccurate, it erases the lived realities of those subjected to its forms of violent domination. Second, I challenge the pervasive myth that we live beyond the horizon of revolution. In the present moment, revolution is either diluted into a rhetorical adjective, stripped of its structural meaning, or dismissed altogether as obsolete or dangerous. This foreclosure is itself ideological. Revolution, properly understood, entails a fundamental transformation across all spheres of life, social, political, economic, and judicial, as well as the reconfiguration of the relations that organize education, media, culture, so on and so forth. But at the end, revolution is about class struggle. Such transformations are neither spontaneous nor guaranteed. They required renewed theoretical work, grounded analysis, and political imagination capable of grappling with contemporary forms of power, including the entanglements of capitalism, patriarchy, theocracy, and imperialism. To abandon the concept of revolution is, in effect, I argue, is to concede the permanency of the current world order, that as we know, it's impossible to continue with this situation.